Okay, so we're recording this session and we're going to be talking about sentence fragments today. Let me go ahead and share my screen and bring up a PowerPoint that I have created for you. And that's what we're going to share. And are we sharing? We are sharing right now. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about sentence fragments. If I can make this work like that. Okay, so we've actually touched on sentence fragments before earlier when we were talking about subordinate conjunctions. And there's many ways to create sentence fragments. Uh, we're going to focus on just two of them today. So earlier, when we discussed complete sentences, we noted that a complete sentence has to have two things, a subject and a verb. So John ate the cake. John is a fireman. We asked the question, where's the word that shows action or existence? In the first one, it's ate. And the word that shows existence in the second one is. So, and then we ask the question, who ate? And look to the left of the verb, John ate. So that's my subject, ate is my verb, also known as nominatives and predicates. Who is? John is, to the left of the verb. And my direct object is cake, and my uh, complement, non-complement is fireman. So in this case, we have two complete sentences above us. Now, if the subject or the verb is missing, or both, then the passage we wind up with cannot by definition be a sentence. It will become what we call a sentence fragment, meaning a piece of a sentence. Of course, if both the subject and the verb are missing, that's also a sentence fragment. So we look at our complete sentences. John ate the cake, and John is a fireman. So we have a fragment with no subject, ate the cake. Well, we don't know who ate the cake. Or is a fireman. We don't know who is a fireman. The subject is missing. Or a fragment with no verb, John the cake. Or John the fireman. There's no verb there. Or neither subject nor verb, the cake, the fireman. You see, you have to have both to have a complete sentence. So if that piece of the formula, any piece of that formula is missing, or added to in some way with a subordinate conjunction or a relative pronoun, then we have an issue, and that's probably not going to be a complete sentence. So we had a little discussion about subordinate conjunctions before. If you recall, once we add a subordinate conjunction to any sentence in the world, it automatically becomes a fragment. It cannot stand on its own. And so these subordinate conjunctions create what we call multi-word adjectives and adverbs, basically adverbs in most cases. So in sentence A and sentence B, it started to rain. So started is my verb, it is my subject. We went home, went is my verb, we is our subject. Those are complete sentences. But if I say, because it started to rain, now I've taken a subordinate conjunction and put it in front of a complete sentence, and that sentence now needs something else to finish the thought. Because it started to rain, what? After we went home, what? So those are incomplete sentences. So if you're fishing for fragments, if you have trouble with making fragments, we're all creatures of habit. We all do things the same way. We tend to misspell the same words. We tend to make fragments, if we make them, using the same words over and over again. And once we learn what those words are, we can go hunting for them. Heck, we can even use the search and find function in MS Word to go in and find those things. I know what my weaknesses are as a writer. I know which words I tend to misspell, and I always double check when I run into them. And that hopefully as you progress as a writer, you'll learn where you tend to sometimes make mistakes and go hunt for them and fix them before you wind up with a finished product. So the two sentences have been changed from what we call an independent clause to a dependent clause. And I got a couple of definitions for you. Basically, a clause is a group of words containing both a subject and a verb. Right? So if you got, it started to rain and we went home, that's a clause. Because it started to rain after we went home, that's a clause too. But we have what we call independent and dependent clauses. An independent clause can stand by itself. It started to rain. A dependent clause cannot stand by itself. It's dependent on something else because it started to rain. You see that? So I don't really care if you understand the distinction. You have to throw this back at me. You just have to understand that anytime you attach a subordinate conjunction to a sentence, that sentence can no longer stand by itself. It's going to need something else. It has become dependent on something to complete the idea. So without getting too technical here, I just want you to notice that each example contains both a subject and a verb. It started and we went. However, these are not the subjects and verbs of the sentence. The subordinate conjunction because and after turn them into multi-word adverbs answering the question why and when. Because it started to rain, what? We left. After we went home, what? We ordered pizza. Follow that? So it's very, very important to understand that just because there's a subject and a verb there, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a complete sentence. You got to look for something like these subordinate conjunctions in there. So if you have because, after, when, until, before, and there's a bunch of them, we went over this last time, starting a sentence, look very carefully to make sure you're not accidentally creating a fragment. Now, fragments caused by relative pronouns. So as I said before, we've already talked about subordinate conjunctions, and there's a whole list of them. But there's only 3 relative pronouns: who, which, and that. And the variations of who, if it's used as an object, is whom. And if it's used as a possessive, it's whose. So who is that? That's a subject. To whom am I talking? That's an object. Whose keys are these? That's a possessive. And which and that are the other relative pronouns. When we use them, we create what we call a relative clause. So remember, a clause, again, a group of words containing a subject and a verb. So a relative clause is a group of words containing a subject and a verb and a relative pronouns. Pretty simple, actually. Remember, a relative clause all by itself is always a fragment. It can't stand by itself. Just like when you stick a subordinate conjunction on any sentence, that sentence cannot stand alone anymore. Same thing with a relative pronoun. You stick that in a sentence, it can no longer stand by itself. So let's go ahead and look. Some examples here. Fragments caused by relative pronouns. I got 2 sentences, sentence A and sentence B. The man left his laptop behind. That is sentence A. My verb is left. Who left? The man left. What did he leave? His laptop. So subject, verb, direct object. The man was sitting next to me. Verb is was sitting. It's a verb phrase. Who was? The man was. What was he sitting next to me in the library? That's a prepositional phrase showing where. Again, all we're worried about are subjects and verbs. Now, they are both complete sentences, each containing the subject and verb, but we can join them with a relative pronoun. In fact, notice we're talking about the same man in each sentence, right? These sentences are begging to be joined, and so we're going to do that with the relative pronoun. So, sentence A, the man left his laptop behind. But in sentence B, if I cross out the man and put in who, and instead, because it's a pronoun, who was sitting next to me in the library, I can combine them. The man who was sitting next to me in the library left his laptop behind. Wait, who left his laptop behind? The man who was sitting next to me, right? The man. Which man? The man sitting next to me. So here I have that second sentence B being relegated to a relative clause, which cannot stand by itself. It needs the other sentence for it to make any sense at all, because the main idea is the man left his laptop. Which man? The man who was sitting next to me. So that whole relative clause is just a big adjective. It's all it is. It's saying which man, specifying the man, right? So it's not saying the man who left it, not the man behind the counter, not the man with the beard, but the man who was sitting next to me in the library. So you see how specific that is. So we're just trying to make sure that you understand these relative clauses are giving us more information about the main part of the sentence, about somebody in that sentence, right? So let's use another relative pronoun. Let's use which. So sentence A, Gertrude traveled to London. Sentence B, traveling to London was always on her bucket list. So we take traveling to London, cross it out, and replace it with which, and we have Gertrude traveled to London, which was always on her bucket list. Now, which was always on her bucket list can't stand by itself. It is a fragment. But traveling to London was always on her bucket list will stand. So if we take a sentence again and we add a relative pronoun to it, in this case, which, we wind up with a fragment. It needs to be attached to something else. And the way you generally fix a fragment is you either attach it to something before it or something after it. You see where it belongs. Typically, it's a matter of punctuation. Let's look at the use of the relative pronoun that. Sentence A, it's a misspelling here, I apologize. The oak was chopped down. In fact, let's go in and see if I can get that. No, escape, come back over here. We're still there? Okay, we'll just go ahead and fix this right now. Why not? Here, here. Okay, come in. The oak. And why not? I got it up. I can fix it right now. I apologize. So, the oak was chopped down. The oak was growing in the yard. Two complete sentences, still talking about the same oak begging to be combined. So I'm going to use that. So the oak that was growing in the yard was chopped down. Notice the pattern I'm using here. I'm taking the sentence being kind of inserting in between oak and was chopped down in the subject and the verb. And again, once I take that relative pronoun that and use it to the way that I'm using it, to join sentences like this, that sentence I stuck it on can no longer be a complete sentence. It's just an adjective saying which oak. The oak in the park, the oak in a neighbor's yard. No, the oak that was growing in this yard was chopped down. So then again, where are we at here? Go down one more. Make this. Sorry about that. There we go. So notes on relative pronouns. When referring to a person, use who, whom, or that. A person is not a thing, so use who if you can. When referring to a thing, use which or that. So that can refer to either a person or a thing. Variants of who would be whose, showing possession, and whom, when it is being used as an object. This is a painting whose artist is known for surrealism, right? So it's showing possession to the artist, possession to the painting, excuse me. And do you know the actress? Oh, I messed that one up again too, so I'm sorry. To whom she is talking or speaking. In this case, whom is the object of the pronoun to. So those are the variations on who. It's whose and whom, but they're considered basically the same things. Just one's an object and one's showing possession, and one is a subject. Let's go down one more. So here are some other points to remember. Anytime you see a sentence starting with who, which, or that, chances are very good you're dealing with a sentence fragment. So remember, as a creature of habit, if you have a problem with fragments in your sentences, you tend to make them the same way over and over again. You don't get creative with how you do them. It's just a habit you picked up and you've perpetuated it over the years. So what you want to do is learn to find the cause of those fragments, whether it's the use of a relative pronoun, such as who, which, or that, or whether it is the use of a subordinate conjunction, because, after, until, before, words like that. We'll discuss other ways to make fragments and fix them in another video, maybe one or two depending, because there's lots of ways to do it. In the meantime, that concludes this video on sentence fragments. I'm going to go ahead and stop the share, and I'm going to come back to the screen. And that's pretty much concludes what I have for you today. And this ends the video. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Here we are.